One of my very favourite things to do on the guitar is to straddle that line between lead and rhythm playing, where I'm not taking a solo, but it's my job to support the melody and the harmony of the tune in some way. And to do this, we mix a whole bunch of things together. Our chord knowledge is really important, knowing our chords and their inversions. Also knowing triads is extremely important for this, and knowing how to find our double stops in thirds and sixths. All of these things can come together to create a really artful approach to rhythm guitar playing. A lot of the time, this style of playing gets associated with soul and R&B. Think Jimi Hendrix, Cornell Dupree, Curtis Mayfield, etc. But in this lesson, I'm going more for that Tom Waits or Bob Dylan vibe. In fact, this is based heavily on the changes for Tom Waits' beautiful The House Where Nobody Lives. This heart-wrenching ballad is off the Mule Variations record and features a completely different side to Marc Ribot's playing. We've often covered his more angular and aggressive gypsy, Cuban meets Chicago blues style, but on this song he gives us a real masterclass in soul and R&B guitar playing. There's also a really stunning live version of this from the VH1 Storytellers show, and it features Smokey Hormel on guitar, who does an equally stunning job, so I'll include a link to that video in the description as well. I'd highly recommend working the whole thing out by ear and lifting some of his ideas from it. You'll easily start to see where the inspiration for today's lesson came from. Also, check out the songs Hold On and Picture in a Frame while you're at it. And Bob Dylan's Time Out of Mind record is full of great examples of this sort of playing. The whole album is absolutely incredible, so I'd highly recommend listening to it from start to finish, but a few standout tracks for me would be Not Dark Yet, Trying to Get to Heaven, Standing in the Doorway, and Till I Fell in Love with You. This album features quite the cast of guitar players, as well as Bob Dylan himself doing a fair chunk of the heavy lifting. You got Robert Britt, Duke Robillard, and producer Daniel Wright himself, all working their magic on all the tracks on this record. Again, I'd really recommend working some of those tunes out by ear and stealing as many cool ideas as you can. So our primary goal here is to be tasteful and respectful of the chord changes and not play too many busy things. We've got to leave a bit of space. Let's imagine we're doing this with a vocalist to come in on top of. I'm playing this fingerstyle for a slightly softer, warmer tone, but it works equally well with a pick or hybrid picking, whatever you prefer. But like I say, I'm going to do this fingerstyle. Now, as always, there are links in the description if you want to get hold of the lesson materials for this. Everything's typed up neatly in tab and notation, Guitar Pro and PDF formats. I'll also include my audio files and my backing track. So the first phrase, we're playing over a D major chord, and we do this. So we're thinking of a D major triad, root, third, fifth, on strings A, D, and G, and I'm hammering into the third from the second degree of the scale. If you've seen my other videos, you'll see how often I talk about this 1, 2, 3, 5 little cell of notes. This is the same kind of thing here. We're using that 2 as a place to hammer on from. And I use my thumb to hit the A string, and then while that rings, I use fingers 1 and 2 to pluck the D and G strings together. And then we go back the way we came, and then resolve that onto the next chord, an A major. And again, we're thinking of a triad here, first inversion, third, fifth root. Just like before, we find the 2, we hammer to the 3 from it. This time I'm hitting all 3 strings at the same time. And then we're going to hammer on from the 3 to the 4. And down to the root. Notice again how I'm picking doubles here. I'm hitting strings A and D together. Hammer on, come away, hit the root note. Then we're on to a G major chord. And all I'm doing there is I'm forming the bar chord and I'm using my thumb to strum down through the first few strings, then picking out the top couple of strings, and then doing one of these really nice, soulful little triad-based hammer-ons. Just the top 3 strings in isolation. I'm hammering on from the root to the 2 and back. Again, the 1, the 2, the 3 and the 5 are often all you need for this sort of thing. And then we go back to a D major chord and we play. So again, triad-based thinking, right? I'm trying to see this triad here. String set 2, second inversion. So this would be the 5th, the root and the 3rd of the D major. I'm hollowing out the middle, which leaves me with this 6th interval. And I'm sliding into that from a whole tone below. Then pulling off to the 5th fret of the B string. And then adding in the root on the G string. And now we have that really nice, dreamy sus2 kind of sound. And then as a little turnaround here, we do a quick stop off back to the A chord, the 5 chord of our key, and we play this. Which again, A major triad. Add the sus4 by hammering on from the 3rd to it. And again, notice that I'm using this as a double stop, hitting these 2 strings together, the G and the B. And then beat 1 of the next section of the tune, we're back on our D major chord using the 1st inversion on string set 3, hammering on from 2 to 3 again. So that's the intro out of the way. Now let's move into the A section. So we already have the first beat of our A section, D major. Now we're staying there a little longer. Then we play this, which we can look at as being from the D major pentatonic scale. In the description, I'll also link to another one of my videos where I go into some depth about these major pentatonic double stops. I really recommend working on them in all positions. I'll include all of that in with the lesson materials, in fact. So we use this, and then we go to our A major chord. We're playing this Hendrix style. So we've got the A major triad on strings D, G and B, and the thumb is hooked over to play the bass note. Also, notice how I'm using this kind of peel technique with my right hand. From the thumb to the 1st finger, 2nd finger and 3rd finger, but all in one swift movement. Nice light touch as well. Really good technique to have under your fingers, that. Then we play. So again, visualizing a triad here, the A major triad, just here again, but bringing that 2 in yet again, as a way of hammering on from somewhere to the 3rd. And then grab the root here, and we're left with that temporary sus2 sound again. Very pretty. And then I'm going down to this D major triad, and hammering on from 2 to 3 again, on the D string this time. I'm hitting all 3 strings together at that point. Then to imply D7 next, play this really neat little trick. This is kind of a common country idea, Jerry Reed style. Take a D7 chord, remove the root note and leave these 3 notes. Slide into the G string from a semitone below, then go back, pick the D string, and then very simple way of getting that G major chord. Sliding in from the 2 to the 3, then the 5th on top, and then the root down low with the thumb. So this whole movement here, D, D7, G. It's all a very elegant way of saying this. D, D7 to G. Which would be the 1, the 5 of 4, and then the 4 in the key of D. Now we're on this G chord, we play this. So this is really nice. This is another very country trick. Take a G major triad on the top strings and hammer on to the 5th fret on both the G and B strings, and now you've got a C major triad. And then go back to the G major and bring that root in on the D string. Then resolve this to the D major triad next door. Then we have this neat little run of double stops on the top 2 strings over the D major chord. Now if we look at those through the lens of D major triads, it all makes a lot of sense. We've got the top two notes of this triad here, and this would be from the key of D major. That might be the top two notes of your E minor triad, for example. And that goes up to the next two, which are from this D major triad here. So really we're thinking of using this D major and this D major and just passing through the D major scale on our way to it. Then the A chord comes along. We play this really pretty thing. Very simple, just back the way we came, but it implies a lot of interesting harmony. It's like we've got A6 to an A7 or an A9 type of tonality. And then we have, and again that's all thinking A dominant 7th. This would be your flat 7 and your 9, back to that D major partial. Then we get another one of those beautiful sus2 type of sounds. And then we resolve back onto D major. And then we have this really pretty line. Again, the job of this is to imply D7. Just like before, we're heading to G, and we want to go from the D to the D7 to the G. Here's the flat 7, the root and the third of D, and we resolve it to the nearest G major triad available. So that would be the first inversion. These things are really important to have under your fingers, pre-loaded and pre-rehearsed. These kinds of movements, from a dominant chord to the major chord that it wants to resolve to. Of course, find that stuff in other locations. Finding the nearest triad to resolve to each time. Endless ways to do it. As a quick side note there, if you can focus a lot of your practice time on rehearsing movements that are common, like common cadences like 5 going to 1, or like I've often mentioned, plagal cadence like 4 or 4 minor going to 1, you'll find that you have a lot of ammunition ready to go when you need it most. Because in some ways you can look at most progressions as some kind of variation on one of those two things. You're always going to need to have the ability to build tension and then resolve it to the next chord, to make it seem like the next chord is inevitable by the way that you set it up with your note choices. That's your job as the lead guitarist, remember that. Okay, so back to the G chord, we're on this triad here, and then we use this trick that I lifted directly from the Tom Waits song House Where Nobody Lives, a beautiful little fill, and we're resolving it to the D chord. But that fill in isolation, thinking of a G major spread triad, or at least I am. So this is your third, your root, and your fifth. And I'm hammering on from the semitone below the root here, so from the 7 to the root, and then go back the way you came, picking both those top strings together and keeping that 10th fret anchored in place. And then to the G string, pull off 9 to 7, and then form this little double stop on strings G and B, frets 9 and 8, slide them up a whole tone, and then fill in the bass note here on the low string. So that would take us to a D major triad, right? And there's our D major root. So the little phrase from Tom Waits' House Where Nobody Lives, and then we're adding this to take us back into where we want to go, which is the D chord. Now this little phrase here, again, just like earlier, D major and D major, and walking the line in between them, we're doing the reverse of that here. We're thinking D major to this D major, and we're just walking down through the D major scale. Now the A chord lands. Very pretty little move here. We've got an A major, Hendrix style again, but I'm starting with my little finger on fret 7 of the B string. I'm doing another one of those peels with my picking hand, then pulling off to the 5th fret and re-striking the 5th fret. Now I'm going to go tricky little move. It's all about thumb position, that kind of thing. If you find that you can't stretch out for this, bring the thumb down a bit lower behind the back and extend the fingers a little more. Because what we're aiming for here is a little sliding maneuver from 7 to 8 and back, and then the 5th fret, and then down to G major, Hendrix style. Then we go very common phrase. Again, sixth intervals here. We're thinking G major, walking down through the scale till we get to this G major. And just isolating strings G and E, cutting away the middle note. And then resolving to a D chord. A D sus2 with a quick little hammer on to the major third. Now a little country phrase that you'll have heard me use before. I love this stuff. Almost pedalsteel sounding. We're thinking D major. Get your third finger down here on the 12th fret of the A string. That's the 5th. Now we're just going to walk through the next few notes of a D major scale, all while this note stays in place. Good practice for your hammer-ons, because we pick, pick, hammer, hammer, leave these last two fingers on to keep those notes alive, then hammer on from 9 to 11 on the G string, then keep that second finger going while you add the final note here, the first finger to the 10th fret of the B string. And you should have ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4 notes ringing at that point, and then you can add the thumb as the afterthought, bringing the root in. And I'm picking the root and that B string together there if we're being really accurate. Now we stay on the D chord for a moment and we play this. So we have the first finger barring the 10th fret on the top two strings, pick them together, hammer on to the 12th fret of the B string, and make sure you don't block that 10 on the top E. Add some vibrato while you're there, maybe a bit of side-to-side movement, a little bit of classical style vibrato perhaps. And then down to the next two notes from your D major triad, the 5th and the 3rd, pull that 3rd off to the 2nd degree of the scale, and then bring that little finger in, fret 12 of the D string, and we have another one of those sus2 type of voicings, just like the one we used earlier. On G, or was it on A? I think it was on A actually. Beautiful phrase anyway. And we do that with the triplet feel. And we tie it into the A major chord that's landed on this beat, and check out where we are. The 5th and the root of an A major triad. Coincidence? I think not. And then down to an A major triad, second inversion, string set 3, sus4 sliding to the major third. Then I grab the A string, then the D string, and then we move this entire shape down for the G chord. And then for the ending, one of these little half bends on the G string, again getting that sus4 sound. Pull off from 2 to 0, and then finish with a D major triad, nice and low. The 5th, the root, and the 3rd. So do take note of some common themes here. This has been a bit of a study in sus2 and sus4 tonality, as well as just the basic triads. If you think about it, most of what we've done here revolves around the 1, the 3, and the 5 that we find courtesy of our triads, and then adding things like the 2 or the 4. It can get you a really long way, that stuff. As long as you know the chord changes that you're playing over, you should be able to find your own beautiful, melodic, creative ways through those changes. Take pride in your rhythm playing, make it stand up as a piece of art all on its own. As a lead player, this is the sort of stuff that you want to be playing in those scenarios where you might be accompanying a singer-songwriter. You know, someone might already be taking care of the heavy lifting with the chords, whether that's an acoustic guitar or a piano, and it's your job to come in and find little textures to decorate with on top. Players like Smokey Hormel, Duke Robillard, Charlie Sexton, Blake Mills, they're masters of this stuff, how to tastefully decorate a piece of music. Okay, so a little bit of tone talk. This is a Novo Solus F2. They've kindly sent me this to check out, and it's a really beautiful guitar. It's a great combination of the telly bridge sound and a really warm and dynamic P90 in the neck. As with every Novo guitar that I've played, the setup and playability is second to none. Just a fantastic piece of machinery, very inspiring to play. I was on the neck pickup all the way through this. I had the tone rolled back just the tiniest little bit, and I'm plugged into my vintage 1964 Princeton Reverb amp, where I'm using the reverb and tremolo that are built into the amp. My tremolo speed is set to 2.5, which is this speed. That will vary from amp to amp, of course. So it's not too fast, not too slow, somewhere in between. And it's not too deep either. I've got the intensity at about 7 out of 10. To get that feel of an amp that's on the edge of breaking up, I'm using a Analog Man King of Tone pedal. Brilliant pedal that I've had for a long time. Of course, it's got a bit of a mythology about it nowadays, but I got that back in, 2008, and I've never gotten rid of it. I'm using the yellow channel on it, and I have my yellow channel not set the default way. It's not set as a clean boost, but I have it set as an overdrive as well. And I've got the gain very low. It's at about 10 o'clock. If I play gently, you'd barely know that it's on. But if I dig in, you can hear a bit of grit starting to come through. And of course on the bridge pickup with a plectrum, that would be more pronounced. As far as recording goes, I've got the amp going through my Universal Audio aux box, and I'm running that into my Apollo Twin interface, and then it goes into Logic Pro. And for the backing track, you're hearing my Martin OM21 acoustic guitar and Logic's inbuilt piano sound. I used a MIDI keyboard to play that part. And the double bass is courtesy of my good friend and my bandmate, Daniel Wright. Dan is a fantastic guitar player, my favourite to play with, and he did me the favour of recording double bass on this for me. So thank you, Dan. So in the video description, I'm going to link to a few songs that are really good examples of this kind of playing. So do check those out. And do let me know down in the comments if you've enjoyed this lesson. And please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Okay, thanks guys. It's been a pleasure to hang out with you, and I'll see you next time for something completely different. Take care.